Hello Reapers, my name is Seth and we are back again for some more Trove to Trove. This is going to be a brief tutorial. I know I say that very often, but most of my tutorials are pretty brief. Most of all, I wanted to talk about some of the changes that ended up coming a couple months ago with the Eclipse update, now that we've actually had some time to experiment with it and try it all out and stuff like that. And I know that this tutorial is technically a little bit late, but for the most part, I just wanted to say that unfortunately, since the Eclipse update, a lot of melee characters, if not all of them, have been completely thrown under the bus as far as shadow towers are concerned. Now, you still can end up using a lot of the melee characters for farming U9 and stuff like that. You know, the Candy Barb is going to end up one-shotting things in U9 with its right-click attack, and even in shadow towers, you can cause a lot of damage. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that these characters are absolutely weak or useless or anything like that. It's just the fact that shadow towers ended up seeing such a massive increase in not only their damage, but the health of the enemies and stuff like that, means that a lot of these characters did technically become useless because of the fact that ranged characters do better. It's not that they're like a character like, oh, you can't use these characters, otherwise you're an idiot. It's nothing like that. It's just a ranged character is going to end up having a lot more survivability in Ultra Towers than a melee character, especially topped with the fact that Hydra is pretty much impossible to beat with a melee character. Dreadnought, you're going to end up taking massive amounts of damage, and again is going to be almost impossible to actually beat with a melee character. Daughter of the Moon hasn't seen much change, but is also going to be another character that's very difficult when you're fighting with a melee character. Now, Candy Barbs are still actually very utilized in Shadow Towers because of the fact that your ultimate ability is going to end up giving everyone in the party attack speed, right? So combining that with a gunslinger is just detrimental. It's going to end up causing massive amounts of damage. Just make sure that you actually time it with your group, that you actually use your ultimate when they use theirs, and then you're going to end up causing lots of damage. But the biggest hit of all was seen with the Neon Ninja. I don't know why he looks so terrible. But with the Neon Ninja, you know, he was actually one of the stronger characters in Shadow Towers, but then the devs ended up changing the way that the Cursed Skulls end up functioning. So for those of you that are new to Trove, Cursed Skulls, you would end up attacking them, and they would actually stay there, and as the Neon Ninja, you could keep attacking the Cursed Skull to build up your Shuriken meter, throw a 3-star Shuriken at all the enemies that were somewhere further on the map. You could have even lured them somewhere, got them entrapped and snared, and then just kept doing rinse and repeat on the Cursed Skulls, just doing your Shuriken over and over and over again. And technically speaking, you could actually keep the enemy stun locked, right? That single-handedly made the Neon Ninja not only very vital for Shadow Towers, but also technically meant that you could solo a lot of the Shadow Towers yourself. You could actually even solo Ultra Pinata God, though it was very difficult, where you would actually lure him into the corner, and hopefully you would be able to get lucky enough with the minion spawns of his that you could actually keep them all snared up in a corner, and then you could just end up killing the boss really, really easily that way. Now, not to say that Ultra Shadow Towers are not something that's entirely easy, depending on the strength of your characters in general, but Neon Ninja saw the biggest hit of all. You know, he's really, really sad about that, just because of the fact that we can't really use the Neon Ninja in Shadow Towers anymore, because whereas certain characters like the Candy Barb have a little bit more survivability than the Neon Ninja just because he's got, you know, higher health in general, the Neon Ninja is a glass cannon. He's just like a glass cannon melee character where you have to get close with everything, and you gotta be jumping around like a freak and doing your shurikens. You have to get up close and personal in order to tag the enemies and, you know, use your shuriken, whereas the Candy Barb, you can pretty much just run to the hills until you end up using your ult over and over and over again, right? So it kind of forces the Neon Ninja into the action. What they've changed with Cursed Skulls now is it makes it so that the Cursed Skulls, when it activates, it goes invisible. The reason that they did this for the overall design of Trove wasn't to hurt the Neon Ninja, it was to help ranged characters, because projectiles would potentially end up getting stuck on the Cursed Skulls, and now that the Cursed Skulls go invisible, projectiles can just shoot it to their heart's content at all of the enemies. But it does mean that the Neon Ninja's shurikens can't actually charge up on a static object anymore. Now you have to go up to the enemies, and ultimately it means you are going to end up taking damage, and you're just not going to end up surviving. Like, you could get hit by an enemy in Ultra Towers as the Neon Ninja and are going to end up draining 2 flasks at a time. Like, it's insane the amount of damage that these enemies end up doing. But most of all, I just wanted to put this as a quick tutorial out there to let you all know that unfortunately, while the Neon Ninja may be utterly useless in Shadow Towers now, that doesn't mean that you still can't try to use him. but it's not, honestly, it's not really recommended. Even as far as the boom boom boomeranger here, you're gonna want to swap over to a bow, just because you're gonna have that much more survivability in being able to actually stay at a distance and shoot the enemies, because they're just gonna end up causing massive amounts of damage. You know, and then as far as like even with the candy barb, for example, you're gonna end up trying to use your number 1 class gem ability to pull all the enemies in. You're just gonna end up getting absolutely destroyed unless your group is strong enough to kill all the enemies before you end up dying. Now, last but not least, the knight, because everybody's always wondering what's going on with the knight, what's going on with the knight. Since the recent updates that they ended up doing with him, the changes that they ended up having with the knight, I already had a tutorial talking about all of this stuff. He still, in the long scheme of things, has actually proved to be an amazing contender in Ultra Shadow Towers. Most of all because I wouldn't actually consider him to be a melee character anymore, because you're pretty much just using your number 1 class gem ability, and you can actually move around while using your class gem ability and not actually have any movement speed debuff from it. And we actually haven't seen any changes. It's safe to actually talk about this now, where you can actually potentially stun lock enemies with your class gem ability. So it's kind of like the knight has replaced the neon ninja, just because of the fact that as you're spamming your number 1 attack, you're going to end up stunning the enemies, and if you time it correctly, you can actually keep them perma-stunned. Now, that in itself is kind of broken, but I feel that in a lot of ways it's not something that's going to end up being nerfed. You know, time will tell, maybe it will. I don't think that it will, just because of the fact that the class itself and the way that it operates and the perfect timing that you have to actually get to have the enemy stunned means that there's actually quite a bit of skill involved with the knight now, which I think is awesome. Because the knight was one of the characters who, since his creation, needed to have an overhaul, and now they've actually done that, and he's actually like really, really good and really, really viable for Shadow Towers. Now, as far as building the character, you're just going to build him towards damage, you know, DPS, damage per second. Shadow Hunter, of course, is going to end up being another physical damage character, but it's a ranged character, so it doesn't really count. You're just going to have that survivability. But ultimately, yeah, we're going to want to probably stay away from the Revenant. Revenant's not going to be too bad as you shield bash over and over, but ultimately you're not really going to want a Revenant in a Shadow Tower. Lots of people like to try and tank with the Revenant, but honestly the Ice Stage is a lot easier to build as a tank, and you're going to end up having much better results with that character. Not to mention the Revenant, while your ultimate ability is very useful for pulling all of the enemies in at once, the Candy Barb class gem ability kind of already replaces what the Revenant can do, outside of the fact that the Revenant is going to have a little bit more survivability just because of his Phantom. And the Lunar Lancer, we're not even going to talk about that, because the Lunar Lancer has always, and I mean always, been a completely shunned upon character in the Shadow Tower. If you ever have a Lunar Lancer in your group, you know, be careful if you're a Lunar Lancer, because chances are you're probably going to end up getting kicked right at the last minute when you're in the boss room, because of the fact that there's going to be tons and tons of other characters that are going to end up doing so much better than you. I'm not trying to like hate on the Lunar Lancer or something. He's fantastic as far as U9 farming is concerned, but as far as Ultra Shadow Towers, he doesn't keep up. He doesn't do anything. You know, you're going to be able to pretty much run in, use your ultimate ability, and then run away. In which case, why would you ever use the Lunar Lancer over using the Candy Barb? Because the other thing, too, that you got to consider with the Candy Barb's ultimate is that where the Lunar Lancer is going to kind of be doing, you know, based on your damage and stuff like that, with the Candy Barb, you don't actually have to have any damage in order to trigger the attack speed buff that you're going to end up getting from your ultimate attack. You're not going to end up doing as much damage, obviously, if you have low amounts of damage and you use your ultimate, but that doesn't really matter because of the fact that you're just using the Barb as a utility character to get that attack speed buff going on with your group, right? The Neon Ninja does have a little bit more survivability than some of the other melee characters, despite the fact that I keep saying he dies a lot, just because your ultimate ability actually has some lifesteal to it, and you can actually not only that, but throw on like Samantha or a Prowling Shadow ally, and that's going to give you even more lifesteal. So you can use your ultimate ability for that so that you can kind of have a little bit more survivability, but ultimately speaking, again, you know, why use the Neon Ninja when you can just use other characters to much more effect in the Shadow Towers? Now, again, this is just talking about Ultra Shadow Towers and a lot of the end game stuff that we got going on. I'm not talking about U9. The characters themselves do actually handle themselves very, very well in U9. I'm going to end up having a tutorial that's going to come out more recently talking about like just the breadth of all of the characters and kind of how they all operate as the game is developed right now as far as U9 and stuff like that, because lots of people always ask. But I wanted to more specifically talk about melee characters in Shadow Towers and why they ultimately don't really work. For ranged characters in Shadow Towers, you can pretty much use everything in the game, but again, we're going to save that for another video where I'm going to talk about all of the characters, or maybe I'll split that between like melee and ranged characters or something. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do for that tutorial. But in either case, thank you so much for watching, folks. That's all the time that we have for today. Hopefully I ended up getting to my point across and ended up explaining it in a way that you can understand, because I know that we got lots of new players coming to the game that are very confused about which characters they should end up maining, and just what characters they should actually be using in Ultra Towers and stuff like that. So again, I hope that this ended up answering any questions that you had, but you can always leave comments in the comment section down below. We got an awesome community. My Reapers are there for me. They'll answer any questions that you have, and otherwise, have yourselves a fantastic day. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. That's going to build up loyalty points to my merch store. Links are in the description for that. And if for the fans that want to go the extra mile, you can donate to me for absolutely free with Gawkbox, Sinora, and Stay Epic.